Good morning. How is everybody this morning? So it's so nice to be back on the air after our extended break, which actually I really enjoyed, frankly. Our family is really big into, we love the Christmas season and we love being able to get together as a family. And I just did not want to have to try to do all of this. So I appreciate everybody giving us a chance for a break because it was really nice. And I forgot how tricky it is to get back into a schedule this morning when I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have anything ready and I'm running a little bit late this morning. And Michael wasn't showing up backstage and I'm thinking, oh goodness, what happened? We just, we have this all planned out. Michael is sick. He just got sick last night. I've been fighting some kind of a stomach bug all week. So, yay for winter illness. So Michael's not going to be joining us this morning. I'm sorry about that. But the best part is we have Julianne Romanello here this morning for us to talk about. And I'm super excited to hear from her because she is, man, I feel inadequate next to her as a researcher. So I'm just so grateful to have her on. And I'm going to pull her on now so that we can start to visit. Good morning, Julianne. How are you?
I'm fine, Jenny, and you are too kind. I was looking at some of your articles last night and I thought she was way ahead of the curve and she knows everything that's going on. So it is my pleasure to be here with you. It's really exciting.
Thank you for that. It's funny because we get frustrated every once in a while. And I actually wrote an article where the title was Rope is Right. Because I mean, it is kind of true, sadly. I mean, if you're just a thinking person, you don't have to be a researcher. You don't have to have a background like you and I do in education and academia. I mean, all you have to do is be a thinking person.
Exactly.
And I think the sad thing, and I think you'd agree with me, having also been a teacher, we're just losing the ability to think.
Yeah. And it's been intentional, and so realizing even, you and I that are awake to this larger agenda, I still find myself thinking there is so much that I don't know, and it took me so long. And you look at all of the research that's been done, and it all points to the fact that, there has been a deliberate dumbing down of our population. And, I feel a sense of loss about that. And it does get you down sometimes, but then you meet other people who are doing this and keep plugging away at it, and that kind of lifts your spirits and gives you reason to hope. I think God puts people like that in our lives when we need it.
No, and I completely agree with you 100%. But I hate to say academic because I don't really see ourselves as academics, but you know what I mean, as somebody who really loves education. It's so depressing to me sometimes even interact with my kids who are all homeschooled, and to interact with them and they don't want to talk about the deeper things. They want to show me a video from TikTok about somebody, driving their car into a wall,
Yeah.
and, oh, isn't this, but he's okay, and you just think, in the scheme of life, it's just such a nothing.
I
We're not
know.
talking about the deep subjects. So
Yeah. And I struggle with that too. I have a preteen, and I mean, he's pretty sheltered, but still, like, the radio calls to him. And I'm saying, I won't use his name on the air, but I'm saying, son, haven't I told you what this is all about? And how the Soviets controlled their huge land expanse. It was because they ensured that every household, no matter how poor, had a radio. And I said, you've seen my videos on this stuff, and it goes to brain computer interface. So just turn that garbage off. But I think as a parent, it's a little bit of a struggle, because the more you say, don't do this, I
oh
mean,
yes.
children naturally want to push those boundaries. So you don't want to cut things off too much so that they totally rebel and embrace those things. But you want to give them, or
Guidance.
guide them, yeah, so that they have the time to develop the experience and learn the history and the principles and concepts that will help them to participate in the world as much as they need to, but be able to also defend themselves from it and think analytically and critically about it. So I think it's difficult, but we do our best. And I have a little saying. I think I always remember the passage in scripture about 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to just bring my 5 loaves and 2 fish,
Yes.
and I'm not going to worry about if it's good enough or if I'm doing enough. And this goes to all aspects of life. We bring what we have, and then we trust that God will do the rest.
You couldn't have said that any better. That's 100%. And I do think that it can be so concerning when what we know. I think that's the worst part. Sometimes I even have told my husband, I'm like, gosh, if we just hadn't taken the red pill,
Yeah,
you know?
I know. I think there are all of these. We have lots of friends, and they know a little bit about it, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
watch out. They're going to take your property. They're going to socially credit score your kids. They're going to take away your car. And our friends who kind of know, they have an inkling about what's going on, but they don't really want to get into all of that. And by and large, they seem a lot happier.
And but
sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't have looked into any of this, but oh well.
It's so funny. Last year when we first started the podcast, we talked about the fact that it just felt like, God had given me a phrase, and that was, "My people perish without knowledge."
Yes.
And so that was kind of what we set forth to do last year on this podcast, was just at least put the stuff out there.
Right.
But it can be so discouraging, because you tell people, especially even people who are, you would think, at least moderately awake, who have some kinds of ideas about what's going on. But, like, for example, because we're going to get into talking about the tax credit here in a second, when you talk about this tax credit with people, their eyes roll back in their head, or their teeth set in their jaw, and they look at you like you're threatening them. You're threatening something, and well, that's not, and they get their back up. And these are even people who are awake, and they don't want to hear it. And I think that the sad and frustrating part is the fact that even all of us, I'm not gonna even separate a little part of us. I'm just going to say all of us have succumbed at some point to the propaganda machine that's been made available in this country, and has been cranking at full speed since probably 1950, certainly 20s, but I mean, maybe full speed about 1950. And we tend to believe the stuff that we hear, And so when somebody says, well, I'm going to give you your money back so you can do something different with your kids that you wouldn't have been able to do yourself, then people stop and they think, well, yes, and it's my money,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so I have found that in all of the time that I have been doing rope, so 15 something years, the time people got Common Core. I don't know why, but the majority of people, once you just kind of explained it and said, do you really want all kids to be learning the same thing? And if it comes from the government, and then they could make that leap, they'd go, oh,
Mhm.
then the government is teaching all the kids, right? They could make that leap.
Yeah.
But with this tax credit thing, they just don't seem to be making the leap. But then the government is controlling the dollars that are going to the private schools. So when do you at any point have private school then? So
Exactly.
let me, instead of me pontificating over your time, do you want me to pull some slides up? Do you want to jump off on some slides? You want to just chat through it? I mean, I'm leaving it up to you.
We can,
You go for it.
I'm really up for anything. I can tell you sort of how I started looking at the tax credit because and what I do and how the tax credit sort of fits into the research that
Let's
I've
do
done.
that. Go.
Um, okay, so, for any of your listeners who aren't familiar with me, because I've only been doing this for about, well, almost 5 years now, but I feel still like a
Only.
newbie. I was teaching at the University of Tulsa. It was subject to a takeover by, I would find out, by George Kaiser and a bunch of tech investors. And, they're in partnership with our city government. And, they wanted to establish a pipeline to the workforce, for college students. And at one time, TU had great academics, and I'm a TU alumni. I did my undergraduate work there, and I really loved that institution. And like you said, we love education. So it was earth shattering for me to discover all of this agenda. So when I started looking at what was happening at TU, you just start to dig, and it took about, I would say, 6 months to go from not knowing anything to understanding that we are being transitioned into a new international economic order. And so many people had been warning about this, but we're all busy kind of living our lives and doing
Right.
regular things. Uh, so I was shocked. But from there, I started looking really at ESG reporting, environmental, social, and governance reporting, and public private partnerships. And my work in Oklahoma has really centered on trying to educate groups, mainly GOP groups, asked me to come talk, but I'll talk to anyone who will listen.
Well, because it affects us all. This
Everyone.
isn't a bipartisan issue. I mean, it's kind of like you think about Nazi Germany. I mean, it
Yeah,
didn't matter what the political view of any of the Jews were, and they weren't all in the same, political spectrum. They were still loaded on the cattle cars and taken to the, you know, taken away. So
yeah,
people have got to understand that this is not just a Republican versus Democrat issue.
right,
And frankly, I think the whole idea anyway is to create a uniparty. That's why, we've
exactly.
shoved, so much of this stuff out, and the Republicans are becoming more left. And you just kind of tend to see, if you're really awake, you tend to see we're pretty much all in one party anyway.
Right. And that, there are two lines of propaganda, one that sort of speaks to people who style themselves progressive, and one that speaks to people who style themselves conservative.
For
And
sure.
unless you know how that propaganda works and how they're moving us to the same end, you know, you will be like your friends who you described who think, oh, well, we're getting our money back. This
Yeah.
is giving more freedom to parents, with the tax credit, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But it's not, because you have to understand that larger dynamic. And, as I was looking at corporate finance, and I've been focusing on, public private partnerships and the end of representative government, I had kind of put some of my work on education on the back burner until it hit home. And, my children are in parochial school. We did homeschool for a while during the COVID fiasco because the school that we were at previously had the plastic, plexiglass, barriers up
Gross.
and masks.
Yeah.
And I never put a mask on my kids. Thank God I was able to avoid that. Um, but so I had not been looking exactly at education until I started hearing from our school that we're at now, uh, lots of talk about workshops. Here, we're going to help you understand the parental tax credit, and we're going to help
Oh, wow.
help parents enroll, and this is what it means. And everyone was marketing it as a good thing. Well, I'm suspicious of anything that is coming out of our legislatures right now. It is all from a template. Every legislature is doing the same thing, and that ought to give people pause. So when I heard about
Let me
this,
stop you right there because I'm
sure,
going to build just 1 second on what you said. So we have several of them, the Southwest Regional, I don't know, there's Legislative Council, there's ALEC, there are all of these different councils. And for some reason, people seem to think that, oh, well, if one state is doing it, then we all should be doing it, which makes no sense to me.
it
Because
makes no
if
sense.
you think about whether you agree with the founding documents or not, and there are a lot of people who don't, but whether you believe in them or not, the whole idea, and Thomas Jefferson said it numerous times, the whole idea was to make the states incubators of ideas. He used that terminology frequently, which meant that the federal government was really just meant to take care of the issues that affected states. For example, a common defense, right?
Yeah,
Interstate transportation. And then the rest of the stuff was supposed to be handled by the states, so that if you went to Maryland, you might want to go to Maryland from Oklahoma, for example, because maybe Maryland had something different that
right,
Oklahoma didn't have. The whole idea was that the states were not meant to be uniform. And
right.
yet here we have these councils, ALEC, American Legislative, what is it, something council, and they all they do is pump out these boilerplate pieces of legislation, and then get willing legislators from each state to go, I'll sponsor it, thank you.
Yeah,
And then nobody thinks about it because they're all like, well, Missouri's doing it. Well, why shouldn't we? Kansas is doing it. And you just
exactly.
think, what happened?
I know. It's,
When did we become common instead of individuals?
Yeah, I mean, that has been really shocking to me because I look at a lot of buzzwords, and I always tell people, if you can spot the buzzwords, they're used over and over again, the same ones. I have lists. I have a blog post that has, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of these
We need
words.
to get that
And
then, your
I'll
blog
send you the
post.
I'll send you the link because
Please do.
you know, if you know those buzzwords, then you can spot any nefarious New World Order program. You just have to notice these patterns. And, when I started seeing these words, I mean, I had been sort of focused on my kids and on my books and what I was teaching, and that's, Western civilization. And so I wasn't reading what was going on in, contemporary corporate America and education reform and all of that. But once I started looking at those materials, I thought this is the same template over and over again. And human beings are different. We grow up in different ways. Maryland has a different type of economy, a different culture, a different vibe than Oklahoma. And you would think that people would sort of use different language um, and what we write in policy or in marketing materials or in our cultural expressions, those would reflect that diversity. And so my thought is that when you see this homogeneity, that should be a major warning sign, right? Just like you're saying, if you see all of these different states doing the same thing, that ought to make us pause. But instead, the reverse is true. When I look at, say, city policy, transportation policy, state policy, almost always these plans justify their innovations by referencing other states. So we have gotten to the situation in which we are just looking for the majority opinion, and we're saying, well, if everyone believes it, it's got to be true. But come on, like, truth has always been resisted by the majority, and it's been resisted by those who are most powerful. So, when you see Oklahoma, coming out with legislation that mimics that of Kansas or of Oregon, then we need to stop and say, wait, where are these ideas coming from? And it doesn't take long to follow the money and follow the buzzwords and the affiliations and to see it's all coming from the top. And, there are templates, and we have legislators who are busy, legislators who want the money, the prestige that comes from working with these global organizations. And what do? They submit these bills without thinking, or some of them really know what they're doing. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt at first. And then we get a common core policy for our entire lives. And that's what, this tax credit is about, just to bring it back to our topic. When I started looking at it and I thought, okay, I've got to see what's going on in the parental choice movement, because a lot of conservatives love that movement. A lot of Catholics love that movement. And, it takes just a quick Google search to see you've got the same talking points across the board. And what is it about? It's about moving us toward a universal model of workforce development. So the states are going to return money. Oh, it's so benevolent, right? They're going to return taxpayer monies to the parents so that they can make their choices. But really, parents aren't going to be making any choices. They're going to be following that template that has trickled down into our schools, into our city governments, into our state governments all over.
It just struck me as you were talking, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm getting to the point where my age is preventing me from holding on to thoughts.
No, I don't mind at all. That's a natural conversation, so don't apologize.
But when you look at, because we talk a lot about the scores, like NAEP scores, for example, which are the national set of scores that are provided for each state in the union. And when you look at those, even those are now pretty much the same. Everybody's failing. It's not like there are huge standouts on that list. Pretty much everybody is. And I think it's probably the best indicator of how the fact actually that we've stopped being 50 states, or 55. Wasn't it Obama thought we had 55? We've quit being 50 states, and now we're just a nation.
Yeah.
One whole nation. And every policy then is going to incorporate every person that's in this nation. And I think those scores are absolutely a perfect pointer. When you say, well, we're all doing the same thing suddenly. Doesn't that sound like globalization? And
Yeah.
people say, no, I mean, this is great. We're getting our tax dollars back. Well, how do you explain then that just about every state in the union has the same problem with their scores? Nobody seems to be really standing out. Nobody seems to be doing a really great job. So what you're saying, I think, is, I mean, you and I are researchers, so we're more interested in fact than somebody's opinion. And all you have to do is go look at actual numbers.
Yeah.
And go, well, this is odd. Hopefully somebody would be saying it's odd, but it's not. Everybody just goes, well, everybody's scores are in the toilet. Well, yeah, but I mean, let's think about that on the larger plane. You just said everybody. This
Yeah.
is a fairly large nation.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big statement to say. I went ahead and I threw this your first slide up because I looked through all your slides and I wanted to read this part. The privatization of public education results in a concomitant statification of private education. Julianne, I have no idea. How do we get people to understand that they're not your tax dollars once the government takes it away from you by force?
That is the $1,000,000 question. You know, I think I don't know how to get through to people on that level. Once you figure it out, tell me and I'll go out there and do it. But
That's why I'm asking you.
yeah, um, I'm not sure. I mean, I think, if we look at how the Oklahoma policy is designed, the amount of money that is offered on paper for each child in a private school is an
Right.
enormous amount of money. Now, I haven't compared that number with other states. So you can get, there are different income levels, and that determines how much of a credit, which is not a credit, it's a voucher in disguise. And I think you talked about this on one of your episodes that I listened to and researching some of this.
Well,
Um,
it's a so there are four different um monetary breakdown. So it's under $150,000, it's under $250,000. There are four categories.
right,
And so for the lower two categories, I just crunched all the numbers and there's no possible way that's not a voucher. These
right,
people are not paying in enough state taxes to be able to get them back.
right,
They didn't have any. So the whole thing is a voucher. So if you're giving these people government money, which is what a voucher is. That's not their money. They
yep,
didn't even put it in the first place. So you can't make that argument.
right,
But the upper two echelons, like the governor at one point said he would take advantage of the tax credit, which insulted me to my absolute core because what was their argument at the beginning? Well, we have to help poor people.
right,
Well, they're not helping poor people because if you look at what was just published in the Oklahoma Voice 2 days ago, they crunched the numbers or they got the numbers from the OSDE or wherever it was, tax commission. 10% more of these so-called tax credits are going to people with incomes over $250,000.
wow, yeah,
So you can't tell, that's a big lie then. I mean, so it goes back to your point then, Julianne, of we're just doing stuff because other states are doing it because there's no possible way that what they're saying can be true.
right. But they're holding out the possibility of up to $7,500 per child. So that is a huge carrot for people, right? I mean, that
Oh
I
yeah.
have 4 kids. If I were in
Cha-ching, cha-ching. Remember the
yeah,
old cartoons
right.
when cha-ching and the little dollar signs would
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's an unbelievable amount. So if I have 4 kids, and I do, and if I were in that first income level, that's over $28,000. It's what, $30,000 a year. It's hard for people to say no to that, especially when the propaganda is telling you this is your money. Well, so you have several lies going on, but it makes.
Shocking. You mean our government would lie to us? Julianne, I'm shocked.
I was too when this stuff hit me. I really thought, because I'm sort of an optimist, and I think we have checks and balances. We have, parties that are supposed to sort of moderate the extreme views and force people to compromise, and you Just like James Madison argues, you have a large republic that has different interests that compete with each other so that the government can't become too tyrannical. Um, that was what I thought before. And then you start digging in and you see, well, there has been a long chipping away of those checks and balances. They were there to begin with,
Yes.
but they have been chipped away over time. And now, one of my main points that I like to bring up with people is that our government is not, that even the federal government, it is not really in control of anything. Behind the government, there are multinational corporations, there are banking interests. There is I call it a financial cartel that is, they, with sophisticated behavioral psychology technology and resources at their disposal. And they will sort of infiltrate the public officials' minds, the groups, the networking groups, and they will introduce these ideas so that it's not like any of our representatives at the federal level and even at the state level and local level, they are not listening to the will of the people at all. They're listening to these giant corporations and financial interests. And so as a result of that, our entire civic dialogue has become about the economy, about finances, like that's the most important thing ever. And it's not. Justice is more important than the economy. Truth is more important than the economy. I think freedom is more important than the economy. So but the way that
Yes.
our public dialogue has gone is just about the bottom line for your pocketbook. So, when you offer these huge carrots to people, and you tell them this is your money and we're going to give it back to you, and then comes the freedom. Well, we're really living in an inverted society, right? You shouldn't have to depend on the beneficence of the government giving you back your money so that you can buy your freedom. That's really problematic. And, I try to tell people that, but I think that concern with being able to pay your bills, with being able to retire, with buying food, groceries, or it's tough for people today. That is putting more and more pressure on them, and they're not thinking about those larger intangibles that are really the stuff of human life.
You
So,
know, I that holy cow. I've always thought about these things in my head just because I think you and I both you were just thinkers. You
yeah,
just think
I
about stuff
can't
all the
stop
time.
it.
Yeah. And usually I write, because that's how I get the thoughts out of my head and make them to make sense. But what you just said, I have never heard nor thought with such clarity. And I'm going to take that and make it a little video that I just put everywhere I possibly can, because I do believe exactly 100% in what you said. And I use the they because, like you said, it's a huge conglomerate of these people. So you just have to use the word they. I do believe that was the whole idea. I remember, oh gosh, was it the 20s with the chicken in every pot? I can't remember who came up with that, the slogan that was the chicken in every pot. And that's oh, Julia has said a couple of really great things, and I have not been looking at my comments. I'm so sorry, Jules. I'll add those in now. But I think that is the problem, is that we get so bogged down in us because that's how humans are wired,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we wouldn't need Jesus if we weren't basically selfish people, correct?
Yeah.
So they know that all of this stuff works on us because the first thing we're going to do is go internally and go, I don't have enough potatoes. I don't have a big enough car. I don't have a big enough house. And it's all not even, and that's the other thing. It's not even what we need anymore, Julianne. It's all about what we want. It's all about um, keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Right. So once they got us keeping up with the Joneses, now it was even easier to propagandize us into, but now you need the bigger car. Now, so it
Yep.
all became about money and what you have and not even really what you need. I mean, we
Yeah.
forgot what we need a long time ago because
Yeah.
that's another way that this tax credit for private education works. We don't need a private education. We're all perfectly capable of educating our own children, whether or not you believe that or not. Otherwise, God would have created the world with public education. So, I mean, it's just the way it is. So if that's the case, they have to create a need in
Yes.
people through propaganda that
Yeah.
people are going, oh, yes, I'm unable to educate my own children. I must have the government do it for me. Right.
Yeah.
And we just have stopped being able to see what that propaganda looks like because of the fact that we're way too excited over what we could get with our tax dollars or what we could be provided or what we could have versus what our neighbor has. And it's that coveting, I think, that really these advertisers and the globalists know works because we'll fall for it every time.
Yeah. I mean, and a sort of classic example of that is the race to the top, right? And
You almost got me in a spit take. Yes, the race to the bottom.
yeah, that
Let's
they
talk about
call a
that a
race
little.
to the top, right?
Right.
And we have seen how that has worked in public schools. It has
Yeah.
been a disaster where you have all of these schools competing to, raise the test scores and their lousy tests, right? But people aren't able to think about it because you want the badge. You want the token that says that you have accomplished this or that. You want the credential. And, I mean,
Another
as
excellent
I
point.
well, when I first started looking at this tax credit, and I thought, and I heard, from our school, and this is a Catholic school, that because parents are hopefully going to receive more money, although the state allocation for this program is someone did the numbers, and I won't even try to do it because I always mix up the numbers unless I have my pen and paper right in front of me. But there's no way that the allocation can fund all of the people who are going to apply for the credit, so it's no guarantee that you're going to get any money. But what I heard from our school administration is, okay, well, that because it's a faith-based it's an apostolate of our church, then the church subsidizes the tuition costs, right? So parents are paying a certain amount of tuition, but that's not enough to cover
Okay.
what
I see what you're
the
saying.
the districts pay for the kids. And so the church comes back and adds them in. Well, so the argument was, with this tax credit, they can, knowing that parents are going to get more money, which we don't know, and in fact it's highly unlikely that most of us will get it, then they can raise up the tuition costs so that the amount that parents pay is closer to the actual cost of educating students, right? So this is, if you don't take the tax credit, which I did not apply for it, on principle, then still our tuition is going to go up, right? So when I started looking at that dynamic and thinking, okay, so the state is going to give back money to parents, but the cost of private school tuition is now going to rise because there's this public money available, my first thought was, this is exactly like what happened in higher education. And, that's where my research started, was higher education. And you look at the widespread availability of federal student loans, and what did that do to colleges and universities? Well, it turned them into, resorts for 18-year-olds. So that race to the top movement, to sort of bring this back, you know, you saw it in public schools, then you saw it with colleges and universities that stopped focusing on excellence in their academic functions, and they started offering a multitude of student services and recreational activities and really nice dorms that people live in. And what happened? You had administrative bloat. You had, students were distracted from their studies. They're not getting a quality education. And it was all because these institutions were competing for students, not not by really increasing their academic offerings, but by extending this recreational environment, and holding it out as as I'm losing the word, like a carrot, or as an incentive to get people to enroll. So you would go to a university not because they were going to give you the best education, they had the best professors and course offerings, but because they had the coolest dorms, right? So the race to the top was taking the form of pleasure seeking and student services and having a good time and making you feel part of the community and putting you into a network that's going to give you this and that. And that's exactly what we're talking about when we say, that our economy and our pleasure seeking is really driving our choices rather than these higher goals of knowledge, wisdom, justice, things, freedom, things like that. And, what I argued to our school administration was, how is okay, so we're going to see tuition dollars go up. We're going to see more people applying for private schools. How can we prevent, in this situation, how can we prevent that race to the top where you start offering a myriad of student services rather than focusing on your core academic mission? How can we prevent that from happening when now the state is throwing so much money at parents, but it never goes to the parents, it goes directly to the school?
Well, and let's point out why it can't go to the parents, because I made this point in my the piece that I made specifically on the tax credit and the rules. It simply cannot go to the parent, because then the state or anybody who wanted to can legitimately argue that state tax dollars cannot prop up a religious entity.
Yeah.
And Linda Murphy is going to be on, I believe it's the 19th, and we're going to talk about that very thing, the separation of church and state, what's happened to that. Why would we allow the government to give a religious entity any state tax dollars? Why would you do that? Why is that suddenly okay that you were to do that? Because if you think we're going to have one world education, we're going to have one world religion too. And if you're a Christian, you read the Bible, you find out that's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
But my purpose, according to what I believe the Bible says, is to keep that from happening as long as I'm alive.
Yeah.
So I certainly am going to push back against that. But what you said is 100% legitimate, because for all of the reasons that I just said. So thank you for saying that. I so appreciate that. It's always good to hear somebody else say something back, because then I don't feel like I'm insane.
No,
So,
well,
sorry.
and I mean, that it's deceptive. It's a trick, right?
Yes.
So, when you look at some of the press surrounding the tax credit, it's called an innovative solution, right? Oh, we're going to, funnel this money directly to the schools, bypass the parents, so that we can avoid the legal constitutional challenges to what we're doing. I mean, that is a deception. You know, like, let's call it what it is. They're being sneaky, and they're using a loophole in the system. I don't know if it's a loophole, but they're just finagling in a way that is not honest, and it's going to result in the the statification of private education. And I think that people are looking at the public schools, and they're saying, these institutions really are failing, and we can do better. So, like, I'm thinking of school administrators, and you know um, and the religious groups that operate different schools, whether it's an independent Christian school or a Catholic school, doesn't matter. I think you have good-hearted people who are saying, we want to, you know, fill this need for education. And we know that the public sector is failing because of the test scores, because of all the garbage that's with DEI in schools. So we can do it better. But they don't understand that it is definitely a trap to bring private education, Christian education, under the control of the state. And it's going to be incremental. Like, these people who design these policies, they work very slowly because they know that we're going to be looking out for our short-term interests. We're going to be looking out for our finances rather than considering these things in the context of the bigger picture, both the practical bigger picture, which is globalization, and then the spiritual bigger picture. So it really is an ugly situation. And I think you're going to see, the state coming in to these private schools and saying, okay, if you want to be accredited, if you want to be eligible to receive these monies, um, you know, for the tax credit monies, then you're going to have to agree to monitor and report progress on all of these different levels. And at first, right now, the way the tax credit works, you just sign your kid up with this company, Merit International, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a few. You
Yeah, I'm going to
sign
pull
them up.
this slide up if you don't mind while you're talking. I'm going to pull the
Sure.
slide about merit up because I definitely want to make
Yeah,
sure we
they are
talk about
bad
that.
news. So, you just say, well, I'm going to sign my kid up with Merit. Merit is going to verify income and sort of handle the data management for the state, the verification process. And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. What? The state's not getting that involved. You just have to have parents report their income and certify that their kid is enrolled. Well,
Let me stop just 1 second.
mhm,
And for people who don't know about the tax credit, so originally when the law was written, the Oklahoma Tax Commission was the one that was tasked with the job of providing this money to parents. There was nothing said about a vendor. There was nothing said about, well, the tax commission, I don't remember now. I may be walking on thin ice here. I don't remember seeing that the tax commission had the ability to go use a vendor. I don't remember that. But that certainly I don't remember that happened. So if originally the state was supposed to be in control of that through the Oklahoma Tax Commission, not because anybody at the Oklahoma Tax Commission is an elected official, right?
yeah.
Our elected officials were the ones creating the rule and then putting the job off on an agency where the head is an appointed position. So now we have a veil between the tax credit and the people, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So then the tax commission says, well, of course, we can't do this ourselves. We're going to go out and find a vendor for this. The vendor that they found, according to what they said, was a vendor that was with listed with OMS, our Oklahoma Management, the basically the state group that allows uh, entities, provides them money and provides them information. At any rate, OMS had a list of vendors, and supposedly Merit was on that list. So there wasn't any vetting that was done at all. According to their own words, they just simply went to a list that was provided by OMS and picked one off. And I want everybody to understand that by picking one off like that, they've already gone, isn't it $40 million over budget from what it's vastly over budget for what they had given the tax commission to be able to administer this program. And now with Merit involved, we're, I think, $40 million over budget. So I want you to describe about Merit, because when you told me about this, I went out and looked it up myself and thought, oh my goodness. Yeah. So please tell us about Merit.
Yeah, I mean, any member of your audience can do exactly what I did. You know, you
I
just
did it.
you just use Google, and you Google parental choice tax credit, and you look at the press, and then you find some of these names that are mentioned. You look at OMS, which I can't remember what it stands for either. Enterprise
Oklahoma
Services.
Management and Enterprise Services.
There we go. So, you see OMS, and you need to look at who's on that commission, who's on that committee. And when you see a company that is contracting with the government to provide some service, you need to Google them and look up what they're doing. So I saw, and maybe it was a press release, I saw Merit International, and I thought, oh, well, I'm going to look them up. And sure enough, they are a top 100 GovTech firm. So they have received a badge that they are in the top 100 companies providing GovTech services. Let me take a minute to just explain what GovTech is. It is the digitalization and privatization of our government. It is the means by which we are outsourcing representative government to AI. That's where it's going. You just look at the country of Estonia that has e-citizenship, e-taxation, blockchain-based digital identity. That's where the globalists are trying to take us, to a situation in which I know it sounds unreal, but I have slides that talk about this. There are lots of white papers by corporations, not just think tanks, but people who have money on the line, are saying that we are moving toward an AI-governed global economy, and it's a rules-based order that is not going to be responsive to the people at all. And we're able to do that. Why? Because we have all of this information and communications technologies. So GovTech, and you can go to their website too. I really encourage it because they have lots of white papers about different pilot programs that are going on.
Is it govtech.what?
.com, I believe. And you can
put it up
can type in GovTech.
Oh yeah, sure enough.
And you can search for Oklahoma, and you'll find different pilot programs that are going on.
Oh my goodness.
So when
I had no idea about this.
I know, it's awful, right? So when the state is contracting with Merit International, which is a top 100 GovTech firm, the people of Oklahoma need to be very worried, because these firms are being used in order to supplant representative government. This is...
Okay, so I need you to say that one more time very, very slowly so that people understand, because people don't even understand how government works right now, right?
Right. And they're going to understand it even less when it is governed by AI. Okay. So where we're going, and this is what Oklahomans and actually people in every state need to be looking at. They need to be concerned with it. They need to see how significant this is. GovTech and all of the different technologies, data capture, the data analytics capacity, the
Oh,
data
wait, I
sharing
can't,
capacity.
I tuned you out because I'm reading this and I'm freaking out.
Yeah, it's really bad. And it's,
Why did you
this is
show
not
this
the
to
deep
me?
web, right? This is like a Google search.
Why did you show this to me?
Ah,
I'm a
it's
little
my
angry at
burden
you
in
right
life.
now.
So,
This
GovTech
is
is the way,
awful. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
that you digitalize state government. And this is the way that you outsource representative government to the AI. And then we lose total control of it, because who controls AI? I mean, no one knows, I mean, we know some companies that are that control it, but most of us, even very technically savvy people, they are at a loss when it comes to understanding how to control these systems, who controls them, the extent to which that the systems control our activities. It's just really a mess. And so,
Well, let me say something right there too.
sure.
So when we first started looking into the state longitudinal database system, because we looked into that with Common Core, because that was one of the 4 pillars of the Obama administration, was getting everybody on this LDS. So when we started looking into that, there were so many data people.
Yeah.
They had, and so many people, data people involved with this. And what Julia says is true, because it's just a
Hmm.
data superhighway. I mean, she's
Yeah.
100% right,
Yeah.
because that's what we found out. But the thing that is so freakish, that ties in basically to what you said, is that these data people are so focused on data and their ability to capture data and their ability to pull data, that they get so data focused that's they're like, hey, we've done this great job. Okay, well, you have, but why are you doing it? What is you doing it? What does you doing this provide? How does that enslave families, as Julia has said earlier? How is this trapping people in a web of data that they can't get out of? These people don't think that way. They think about their jobs, and I don't even think so much of them have a clue as to what's going on. Is they're just, you know, completely dug into their jobs and how well they do their jobs. And what they're doing is really honestly enslaving families. Anybody who goes to a public institution, and like you said, we didn't even have a chance really, because we're running out of time. It's already 10 o'clock to talk about the workforce stuff. I mean, we're going to have you back, because you have been totally one of my favorite interviews of all time, because you're so knowledgeable on this topic. And we don't even have to have a slide program to go through. I mean, you can just discuss it on the level as that people can understand. They don't. And if you look at this video and you say, well, it's drinking from a fire hose, well, stop. It's not. I mean, Julianne's done a beautiful job of being able to explain this on a very basic level. So, really, as you watch this video, stop and use your critical thinking skills. If you're a Christian, use the discernment God gave you. That's why God gave you a soul, was to use it to go, this doesn't sound right. Maybe I should look into this further. Let's see if we can hit just a few more things about merit before you get off of here. But I do want to get you back on as soon as we can, so that we can hit kind of the workforce
Hmm.
issue, because I do believe people don't understand, because of propaganda. Well, we have to have kids who are able to go into a workforce. Oh, for Pete's sakes, how many hundreds of years did we have kids doing just fine? Oh, but it's because we're now a digital society and we have to have, there are always these excuses that they put out for why they need to trap kids in a system that we're propagandized to think is okay. So we have got to start really getting to the bottom of that this year, calling out the people in our legislature who are for this. And by the way, our Governor Stitt, just like his predecessor, Governor Mary Fallin, are all on board with this workforce thing.
Yeah.
They should have no ability to do, but Governor Stitt is all about giving private money to public, or giving public money to private institutions.
Yeah.
Well, but we have to have tax credit so that we can have this business succeed in Oklahoma. No. And if you say, I'm a Republican, and this is for you, Governor Stitt, if you're going to say that you're a Republican, and yet you say it's just fine to be able to give private money or public money to private companies, then you're not a Republican, because basically that meddles with the free enterprise system, to the fact that you're actually doing the communist thing of elevating one business above another, and then it's not a level playing field. Not that we've had a level playing field since, what would you say, the 20s?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even know that we did in the 20s, because the progressives used their springboard in the 20s to start, really meddling in this. So I don't know, back maybe at the beginning of the war, at the nation, the world, I don't know. I don't know, but I mean, it's not okay. It's simply not. And Governor Stitt is a member of the National Governors Association. You talked earlier about, all of these groups and the homogeneity of the United States not being, individual states, but just one great big conglomerate.
Mm-hmm.
The NGA is one of the huge reasons why we can say that. Which we don't want to say, but the National Governors Association is the one that does pump a bunch of this nonsense into. That's probably true. Since the English are on the Constitution, everybody just went, we've done it now. Let's move on with our own agendas. Okay, so let me pull this back up for just a second so you can tell me, because there was a slide in here about merit that was really super scary to me, and it was what they were doing. So can you give me kind of an overview of merit and why they're bad?
Yeah. So, I mean, besides being part of this, transformation of government, what merit in particular is doing is setting up LERs, learning and employment records for students. Okay. So I don't think right now that they have a program with the state of Oklahoma to establish LERs for each student, but you can you could place a bet on the fact that that's coming. And what a learning and employment record is, it's tied to a digital wallet, which is a way for people to store credentials about their entire lives in a digital format that is shareable. It is, it's going to be seamless across platforms, meaning that anyone can access it, who you give permission to, although you're gonna be sort of forced to give the permission, or else you won't get to participate in society. But if you just look at the fact that in many other states, Merit is setting up these learning and employment records for students, for emergency responders, so that you can quickly share the fact that you have access to an emergency scene and that right qualifications to be there and help out. They're doing all sorts of things with digital wallets, verified digital identity, and learning and employment records. And so when you look at the whole picture of what the state of Oklahoma is doing, it has an innovation and digitalization strategy. They're using Workday platform to measure human capital performance for state employees. And now they're working with Merit Inc., which is known for its verified digital identity services and learning and employment records. And just in plain speak, what is a learning and employment record? It is what you need for social credit scoring to occur. And, you mentioned Linda Murphy is going to be on. I learned so much from her when I started doing this. And she told me that when she started looking at, say, special ed and how that was managed by the state, she could see a trajectory toward having, you have an individualized education program for special
Right.
ed students. And she said, Julianne, the goal seems to be to have an individualized educational program for everyone.
Everybody. Yes.
And
Well, and
that's,
Janet Barisi, when she was the Secretary of Education in Oklahoma, she said that over and over and over again to drive the point home that we needed to have Common Core,
yeah.
right?
Well, that's
Um,
exactly what this is setting up.
yeah,
Because if you look in all of the documents from the Governor's Council on Workforce and uh, is it Workforce and Economic Development or
yes,
Education
correct.
Development? I can't
No,
remember.
economic
But
development.
when you look at it, it talks about setting up individual ICAP, individual career and academic pathways.
Right.
That is exactly what Linda was talking about with having an IEP for every student. And
Yeah.
working with merit on these learning and employment records is exactly that process. It's starting that process of setting up a blockchain based transcript of life. It's going to have medical records, it's going to have family experiences, it's going to have, you know, eventually what you buy online, what you look at online, that's all going to be tied to a student's social credit score. And you can see that, now we are moving into the era of shaping human beings for the workforce. And you mentioned how Stitt loves to give public money to private industry. Well, when we're talking about preparing students for the workforce, this is a workforce that serves the needs of business and industry that have been selected by our government and their corporate sponsors, basically. So we are not talking about a situation in which you have many different companies, firms, small businesses, individual entrepreneurs doing their own activity and they all operate on a level playing field. No way. The state has already picked target
The
industry
winners.
clusters, and now they are going to use that carrot of the $7,500 per child for private education to meet the needs of business and industry. And just as I know we have to wrap it up, so I'll just give you sort of my hypothesis and we can talk about it next time, is that the public schools are going to linger around for a while. I think that the end goal
Yeah.
is to destroy them and make everything privatized, and you have an individual career pathway for each
Well,
student.
that's what Brett Farley said.
Mhm.
If you guys want to go back and look, we interviewed Brett Farley, who is the communication director, I think, for the Catholic Archdiocese in Oklahoma. And that's exactly, what Brett says. And that's exactly what all of these people, OCPA are the worst. Oklahoma Council for Public Affairs.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be conservative, but they have pushed and pushed and pushed this stuff. They never stayed out of the Common Core fight. They never got into it. They never did anything with it at all. They have, uh, not opposed tax credits. These people, and that's the other problem that we have organizations in Oklahoma that people turn to that they
Yeah.
believe are trusted, but whether they mean to or not, they're following this same trajectory, and they're the ones that uh, are suggesting these things. And Brett Farley worked with, several of the people at OCPA to be able to do this. So, and he said basically the same thing. You can go online to our YouTube channel and find his interview with us.
Yeah, I mean, the writing's on the wall, right? It's just sort of a matter of time, unless the people start to understand these things and fight back. But if they don't, my hunch is that while those public schools linger around, their students will be groomed, and that's a word I use deliberately. They will be groomed for careers in robotics, STEM, computers, and so on, all of these technical careers. And then the private school students will be groomed for the social change uh, industry of, it looks like volunteerism. That's what most people would think about it, but it's really providing services for, people who have undergone trauma, for homeless people, for mentally ill people, for this, that, and the other, pushing the sustainability agenda. So you're going to have the private school students being sort of groomed for this global citizenship of serving others. It's not going to be service that is based on a love of neighbor as self.
Individual service, I feel, therefore I will do. Yeah.
Right. It's going to be, students in the private schools will be groomed for this. It will be taught to them that it's part of Christianity, and, and they'll do it in order to get the next volunteering opportunity, because you have to volunteer, you have to engage in community service to build up that learning and employment record that's going to make you desirable to the host of philanthropic organizations that, with business and industry, are going to be dictating the totality of our lives. So it's really, it's a big it's a big foe that we have here in this tax credit. It looks so innocuous to most people, but it really is a nasty thing.
Well, it's interesting to me. You have been an absolute charm. I mean, I've loved talking to you. I'm going to call you up and we're just going to talk for 3 days.
Yeah, we could.
Just because. But I'm not kidding. I mean, after we hang up, I definitely want to get you booked for next month if we can do that, because we're also trying to back up, because this is a big election year. We're trying to do some election integrity pieces as well. So we're trying to work those in. But what you have done, such a phenomenal, I mean, seriously, you have done a phenomenal job bringing this down to, I think, the level that anybody who's very interesting, who's interested in this, could actually understand it. And, I'm just going to beg people really to share this with their friends and with their family members, and maybe even talk about it together as a group, because it makes so much sense if you'll just do some deep thought on the topic. It just makes so much sense. But Julianne, you've done such a brilliant job of explaining the fact that they do this very slowly. They do it in ways that we're not looking for. I mean, we would think that volunteering, is great. I mean,
so nice.
They take the things that we can buy into, even as Christians, and then use them against us, use them in ways we wouldn't anticipate, use them in ways that, if we just stop to think about it, we're unchristian. I mean, because I think, just to wrap up, I'm going to say something that I feel very strongly about. Christians are being led down a very wrong path.
Yes.
Christianity is not corporate. You are not corporately saved. You don't get saved just because you go to a church. You're not saved because you're in a group of believers. It's an individual thing. That was the beauty of Christ. He preached to individuals. He didn't preach to the church. He preached to individuals. And we've got to stop somehow thinking that Christians are a corporate body. We're not. We're individuals. And when they take that individuality away from us, we're lost. I mean, we're lost. We become part of a machine.
Yeah.
And that's not who we are as Christians. We're not part of a machine. We're individual beings made individually by God, who knows every hair on our heads. If we were a corporate body, God would not know every and be able to name every hair on our head. We're individuals. That's why we struggle for individuality. That's why which is again something else that's used against us in propaganda. We're propagandized in that way because we know that we're individuals. We struggle to be an individual and maintain that identity in Christ because that's what we're supposed to do. So I think anytime you hear corporate anything, I think Christians need to really turn up those hearing aids, on our discernment and stop and ponder. And you said it earlier when we first started out, Julianne, again, 100% right. We're pulled in so many directions that we will not make the time, because we can, but we will not make the time to sit down and quietly reflect on these issues. And it's not going to come to us as a shot in the dark while we're doing 5 other things. Our brain is too occupied at that point to be able to really tease this stuff out. You have to make time for quiet time every day. You have to. You have to have that time to sit down. I usually do it by reading my Bible and, and going from there. But you have to make time to be in the quiet, because that's when you're able to use your discernment to the best of your God-given ability. Yeah. So, Julianne, I just can't thank you enough. And I'm sorry I, again, pontificated for that last 4 minutes there. But what you've said is so important. And I was just hoping to be able to tie it up even a little bit there. If you had kind of one word to leave us with, since I just did it, what would you do until you can come back and talk to us again? And we'll go more on the merit and more on the workforce technology.
Well, first, I mean, you've said some really nice things about what I've said, and I just want to give credit to, I have learned from so many people, and I am so grateful for those of you who were fighting this fight for many years before I even knew about it. So, so I just want to throw that out there and say that I am grateful. And, as we try to navigate these issues, we want to have those individual encounters. We want to have that discernment and that quiet time. And we need to have conversations with other people who are doing the same thing. So until I come back, until you do it, the next show, then I would just encourage, anyone who's listening to, try to have one of those conversations, because the more we talk about this with people who do understand, it hones our ability to talk about it with those who aren't quite there yet. And we need to bring this narrative into the public realm, because the guys who are pushing these policies are more afraid of an aware people than anything else. And once we normalize conversations about what is genuinely, truly happening, then I think miracles can happen. So that's just how I would, that's not very concrete, but that is what is on my heart to finish with. So thank you so much, Jenny.
Well, no, and thank you. I just can't tell you thank you enough. This has been such a great program. I was so, we've had a break, and coming back, I thought, oh gosh, I hope I'm on my game, but I didn't need to be because you were. So that was awesome. I'm going to have you come back anytime we have a break. Well, I'm going to get Julianne on. All right. Well, hang on just one second, if you don't mind. So I'm going to put you in the waiting room for just a second while I can finish up here, and then let's you and I get a date for you to come on next, because I'm sure everybody would be excited about that. So hang on, and I'll be right there. So I'll see you in a minute, and thank you again.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jenny.
All right, everybody, that was unbelievable. I just can't even say how excited I am about that particular that interview being the first one that we did back. I think it was phenomenal. So you're going to have to give me a second. I just want to make sure that I thank everybody who has donated to our efforts this last year. I just very much appreciate it. For those of you who may not know, we do have a Patreon account. If you would like to join our Patreon account, I'm going to put it back up here just a second so you can see. It's $8 to start. That's all we ask for a month. If you're interested in helping us continue on with our mission and what we do, I would surely appreciate that. And for those of you who are Patreon members, thank you again very much. We just can't appreciate you enough. And for those of you who watch and support, again, our hearts go out to you. We really appreciate you. Please don't forget that anytime you can go to our website, which is on our rope2.org, and you can sign up for our newsletter. We try to be faithful and get one out every single week, and we try to include news and then the wrap-ups that we have of the videos that we have for the week, and make sure we kind of let you know what's going on in the week to come. So we will have Linda Murphy on, I think on the 19th. We're dedicating 2 programs this month to election integrity. I did put my observations up on our website, rope2.org, about what I've seen as a member of the Oklahoma County Election Board. You might be interested in that. Just as I said, and I'll just close with this again, please make sure you're sharing these videos. Please make sure that you're taking the time to really stop and think about what Julianne said today. Discernment is, we have that. Certainly as Christians, we have that. And the only way to be able to use that is in our quiet time so that we can be led in the direction we need to go and then be able to explain it to others. So again, I truly appreciate seeing you today. Thank you so very much for being with us. And we will see you on Friday when Sherry Conley, our rope regular, is going to be here. And she's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the legislative session. If you have any questions about how the legislative session works, what do you do to pass a bill, all that kind of stuff, since the session's getting ready to start next month, she'll be here to tell you that. So make sure that if you're on Rumble right now, there are a number of you that are on. If you want to add your questions for her, you can do that in that chat there. I do have it up on my other screen so I can watch it. And I hope to remember to add our comments in so I can stay on top of those this time. So sorry about that. But I keep trying to remember to work that in. So again, thank you for being with us. We hope to see you again on Friday morning at 9 o'clock when we'll have Sherry Connolly here with us. Thank you so very much and have